I found the manila folder on my kitchen table at 3:47 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, and for reasons I could not yet name, I was afraid to touch it. It was not dramatic. It was not wrapped in warning tape or marked with red ink. It was just a plain folder, the kind you buy at any office supply store, sitting there on the blue checkered tablecloth I had washed and ironed that very morning. But my daughter Audrey was sitting across from me with her hands folded, and her face carried an expression I had only seen twice before in her 29 years. Once when her college roommate died in a car accident. Once when she lost the baby. This is not a news report. This is a story about what happens when a mother realizes that love and truth do not always live in the same house. The names here are part of the telling, but the feelings behind them are things many families will recognize, even if they have never spoken them out loud. My name is Eleanor Ramsey. I am 76 years old, and I have lived in Lexington, Kentucky for most of my life. My husband Victor and I raised 2 daughters in a brick house on Hartwell Crescent, a quiet street where people still wave from their porches and remember when the grocery store was a hardware shop. I taught elementary school for 32 years. Victor worked in hospital administration until he retired 5 years ago. We are the kind of people others describe as steady, dependable, the type who send Christmas cards on time and keep their lawn neat even in August. But that afternoon, sitting at my own kitchen table with my younger daughter staring at me like I was a stranger she was trying to recognize, I understood that steady is not the same as safe. Audrey did not say anything at first. She just pushed the folder 2 inches closer to me, her fingertips resting on the edge like she was anchoring it to the table so it could not disappear. Her nails were unpainted. Her hands were thinner than I remembered. She had always been slim, but since the miscarriage last November, she'd become angular in a way that worried me. Not sick, exactly, just harder to hold. I looked at the folder. I looked at her. I tried to smile, the way mothers do when they want to smooth over tension before it becomes something neither of them can take back. "Honey," I said softly. "What is this?" She did not smile back. "Open it," she said. Her voice was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that comes after someone has practiced saying something 100 times in their head and finally decided the moment had arrived. I reached for the folder, but my hands were shaking. I could not hide it. Audrey saw. She always saw everything I tried to hide, even when she was small. When she was 7, I told her we could not afford the class trip to the Science Museum. And she looked at me with those dark, serious eyes and said, "It is okay, Mom. I know you are scared about the mortgage." I had never said a word about the mortgage, but she had heard me on the phone with the bank. She had listened through the heating vent. That was Audrey. She listened when no one thought she was paying attention. I opened the folder. Inside was a single piece of paper. Official letterhead, laboratory name at the top, date printed in the corner, a DNA paternity test result. The air in the kitchen changed. It did not get louder. It got quieter. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the wall clock shaped like a rooster that Victor bought at a flea market in 1998. The sound of my own breathing. I scanned the page quickly at first, the way you do when you are trying to understand something before your brain catches up with what your eyes are seeing. Then I read it again, slower. Name of tested child. Genetic material collected post-mortem. I stopped breathing. Name of alleged father listed. Probability of paternity, 99.97%. And then I saw the name. Not the name I expected. Not the name anyone had ever said out loud. I looked up at Audrey, and my mouth would not form words. She was watching me the way a person watches a candle they have just lit in a room full of gasoline. "You see it now," she said quietly. I wanted to say no. I wanted to say there had been a mistake, a mix-up at the lab, a clerical error, something explainable and fixable and small. But the look on her face told me she had already asked herself every single one of those questions. She had already chased every escape route, and now she was sitting here, in my kitchen, asking me to stop running, Before I go any further, I need to take a breath here. Telling this kind of story is not easy, even when it is told to help somebody. If you are still with me, would you do this old woman a kindness and tell me where you are watching from? What city, what state, and what time it is there? I like knowing I am not sitting alone with these memories. If this story is touching something in you, leave a like. Subscribe if you want another story tomorrow, because there is one here every day. Now let me go back to that afternoon. "Audrey," I said, and my voice cracked. "Where did you get this?" "I requested it," she said. 6 months ago. They kept tissue samples after the loss, standard procedure in cases where the pregnancy ends late. I had the legal right to request testing." "But why would you—" "Because I needed to know," she said, and her voice finally wavered. Just a little. Just enough for me to hear the girl underneath the woman. I needed to be sure before I opened my mouth, before I accused anyone, before I destroyed what was left. I stared at the name on the page. It was not the name of Audrey's boyfriend, the man everyone assumed was the father, the man she had dated for 2 years before the breakup, the man who sent flowers to the hospital and then quietly disappeared from her life because neither of them could carry the weight of what they had lost. The name on the page was someone else, someone I knew, someone I had defended, someone I had lived beside for 43 years. "No," I whispered. Audrey folded her hands on the table. Her knuckles were white. "I did not come here to accuse anyone, Mom," she said. "I came because the paper already did." I want to pause right here, because this is the part I wish more families understood. A small change is not always small. Sometimes it is the only language a hurting person has left. If you know what I mean, tell me in the comments where you are listening from tonight. And if someone you love needs a reminder to pay attention, share this with them. Subscribe if you want to sit with me again tomorrow. I have more stories to tell, and every one of them carries a lesson. Let me tell you about the house where I raised my girls. 318 Hartwell Crescent is a 2-story brick house with white shutters and a front porch wide enough for 2 rocking chairs and a metal side table that rusts every spring, no matter how many times Victor repaints it. The kitchen faces east, so the morning light comes in through the window over the sink and turns the countertop yellow. I have always loved that light. It made even the hardest mornings feel manageable. Victor and I bought the house in 1981, 2 years after we were married. He was 26. I was 25. We had exactly $4,000 saved, and the down payment took all of it. Our first night in that house, we sat on the floor in the empty living room and ate pizza straight from the box because we did not own a table yet. Victor told me that one day we would fill the house with children and noise and love, and I believed him. I have always been good at believing Victor. He was the kind of man people trusted immediately. Calm under pressure, good with details. He never raised his voice, even when our older daughter Caroline crashed the car into the mailbox at 16, even when the hospital called to say there had been an error in a patient's chart and his name was on the approval form. He would sit down, assess the situation, and fix it, quietly, efficiently, without drama. That was his gift, problem solving. I taught 2nd grade at Oakmont Elementary for 3 decades. I loved my students. I loved the smell of chalk dust and the sound of small voices reading out loud for the first time. I loved the notes parents would send at the end of the year, thanking me for helping their child learn to love books. Teaching was not just my job. It was the part of me I understood best. But at home, I was always a little uncertain, a little worried I was doing it wrong, a little afraid that my daughters would grow up and realize their mother had been pretending to know what she was doing the entire time. Victor never seemed uncertain about anything. When Audrey was born, he was the one who stayed calm when she would not stop crying in the middle of the night. He was the one who researched colic remedies and adjusted her formula and rocked her until dawn. I remember standing in the doorway of the nursery, watching him hold her against his chest and thinking, I married the right man. I still believed that yesterday. Audrey grew up serious, thoughtful. She was the kind of child who asked questions adults did not know how to answer. Why do people lie if lying makes them feel bad? Why do we say we are fine when we are not? Why do some families pretend everything is okay when everyone knows it is not? I did not always have good answers. Caroline, our older daughter, was easier. She laughed more. She trusted more. She moved to Atlanta after college and got married and had 2 boys, and we see her twice a year at Christmas and summer vacation. She calls every Sunday. She sends pictures. She is happy, or at least she says she is, and I have learned not to ask too many questions. But Audrey stayed close. She lives 20 minutes away in a small apartment near the university where she works as a research coordinator. She comes by for dinner every other week. She helps me with the garden. She sits on the porch with me and drinks iced tea and talks about books and work and everything except the things that hurt. Until today. Today she brought the hurt to my kitchen table and asked me to look at it. I set the DNA report down carefully, like it might catch fire if I moved too quickly. "Audrey," I said, "I do not understand. How is this possible?" She leaned back in her chair. Her face was pale, but her eyes were steady. "I've been asking myself that for 6 months," she said, "and the only answer I keep coming back to is this. Someone lied. Someone hid the truth. And someone made sure I would never know unless I went looking for it myself. But who would? Mom." She cut me off, and her voice was sharper now. "Do not do that. Do not pretend you do not see what is right in front of you." I looked down at the paper again. The name. Victor Michael Ramsey. My husband. My throat closed. "This has to be a mistake," I said. "There has to be an explanation." Audrey shook her head slowly. "I thought that too," she said. "For weeks, I told myself the lab made an error. I requested a second test from a different facility, same result. I checked the chain of custody, I checked the dates, I checked everything, Mom. There is no mistake." "But how—" I could not finish the sentence. "I do not know how," Audrey said quietly. "I do not know when. I do not know if it was one time or more. I do not know if he remembers. I do not know if you knew." "I did not know," I said, and the words came out like a sob. She watched me for a long moment. "I believe you," she said finally, "but that does not change what is on the paper. Thank you for staying with me this far. I know this is heavy, but I promise I am not telling it to leave you in the dark. I am telling it because somebody out there may need courage or patience or the reminder that love must sometimes ask difficult questions. If this is helping you, leave a like. Tell me what time it is where you are. Morning, afternoon, or the middle of the night. I read those comments like postcards from people I may never meet, but still care about. I tried to think back, tried to remember when Audrey would have been near Victor in a way that could explain this. But my mind was blank, panicked, scrambling through years of dinners and holidays and ordinary days and finding nothing that made sense. "When was the baby due?" I asked, though I already knew. "November 6th, Audrey said. "And when did you conceive?" She finished the question I could not. "February, maybe late January." I closed my eyes. February of last year. Audrey had been dating Marcus, a kind man who worked in IT and made her laugh. They had been together for 2 years. Everyone assumed the baby was his. Audrey had never said otherwise. "Did Marcus know?" I asked. "No," she said. I did not know, not until the test. Then how? She looked at me like I was a child who refused to learn a simple lesson. "Mom," she said, "I do not remember. That is the problem. I do not remember anything that would explain this, and that terrifies me more than the test itself." The refrigerator hummed. The clock ticked. Outside, a car door slammed, and I heard Mrs. Callahan from next door, calling her dog. "What are you saying?" I whispered. "I am saying I need to know what happened," Audrey said. And I need to know if you are going to help me find out, or if you are going to protect him." "I am not protecting anyone," I said, but even as I said it, I felt the lie forming. Because part of me wanted to close the folder, wanted to tell Audrey she was mistaken, that the science was wrong, that we could go back to the way things were before she walked through my door. Part of me wanted to choose the version of my life where Victor was a good man and I was a woman who had built something solid and safe. But Audrey was my daughter, and she was sitting across from me, asking me to choose her. "I need time," I said. "Time for what?" she asked. "To think, to process, to talk to him." "No," her voice was firm. "You do not talk to him. Not yet. Not until we know more. Audrey, he is my husband. And he is the name on that paper, Mom." She pointed at the document. "You do not get to warn him. You do not get to give him a chance to explain it away, not until I understand what happened to me." I wanted to argue. Wanted to say she was being unfair, that Victor deserved the benefit of the doubt, that marriages were built on trust. But then I looked at her face, and I saw the girl who used to crawl into my lap when she had nightmares. The girl who asked me once if people could be good and bad at the same time. The girl who always knew when I was lying. "Okay," I said. She exhaled. "Okay," she repeated. We sat in silence for a moment, the kind of silence that follows an earthquake when you are waiting to see if the ground will hold. "What do you need from me?" I asked finally. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small notebook, the kind with a blue cover and grid lines inside. She opened it and slid it across the table. "I need you to remember," she said, "everything. Every time I was at this house in the months before the pregnancy, every time Victor was alone with me, every time something felt off, even if you told yourself it was nothing." I stared at the blank pages. "I do not know if I can," I said. "You can," Audrey said, "because if you do not, no one else will." She stood up, smoothing her skirt with both hands. She looked older than 29. She looked like someone who had been carrying weight no one else could see. "I am going home now," she said, "but I will be back in 3 days. And when I come back, I need you to have something written in that notebook, even if it is small, even if it feels like nothing. Write it down." "Where are you going?" I asked. "To see someone who might have answers," she said. "Who?" She hesitated, then said, "A counselor, someone who works with memory recovery." My chest tightened. "Audrey, you do not need—" "Yes, I do," she said, "because right now all I have is a test result and a gap in my memory. And I need to know if that gap is there because I forgot or because I was not allowed to remember." She picked up her bag and walked toward the door. Then she stopped and turned back. "Mom," she said, "I love you, but if you choose him over me, I will know, and I will never forgive you." The door closed softly behind her. I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the DNA report and the empty notebook, and for the first time in 43 years of marriage, I did not know what to do. I did not move from the kitchen table for 20 minutes after Audrey left. The light coming through the window turned softer, the way it does in late afternoon when the sun starts to sink behind the trees. I could hear the furnace kicking on in the basement. I could hear the faint sound of a lawnmower 2 houses down. Ordinary sounds, the kind that used to make me feel safe. Now they felt like a layer of paint over something rotten underneath. I picked up the DNA report and read it again, slowly this time. Every word, every number, every official stamp and signature at the bottom of the page. I was looking for an error, a typo, a reason to believe this was not real, but the document was clean, professional, undeniable. Victor Michael Ramsey. Probability of paternity, 99.97%. I set it down and pressed my palms flat against the table, trying to stop my hands from shaking. Victor would be home in 2 hours. He had a standing golf game every Tuesday afternoon with 3 men from his old hospital board. He would walk through the door at 6:15, hang his jacket on the hook by the stairs, kiss me on the cheek, and ask what was for dinner. That was our routine. 43 years of routine, and I did not know if I could look at him. Before I tell you what I did next, I want you to remember this. Concern is not the same as accusation. Paying attention is not the same as judging. If you have ever been called dramatic when you were simply worried, write the word "listen" in the comments. And if you have not subscribed yet, I would be grateful if you did. There is a new story every day, and maybe tomorrow's story will reach someone right when they need it. Let me tell you about the man I married. Victor grew up in a small town outside of Louisville, the youngest of 3 boys in a family that valued discipline and achievement. His father was a surgeon. His mother was a pianist who gave lessons out of their home and expected perfection from her sons. Victor once told me that he learned early that mistakes were not just failures. They were moral failings. You did not make errors. You did not let people down. You fixed things before anyone noticed they were broken. He carried that belief into everything. When we met, I was 23 and teaching my first year at Oakmont Elementary. He was 24 and working his way up at St. Catherine's Hospital, starting in records management and moving into administration within 3 years. He was brilliant with systems. He understood how hospitals worked, not just medically, but structurally, how information moved, how decisions were made, how power flowed quietly through hallways and behind closed doors. People respected him, doctors, nurses, board members. He was the man they called when something went wrong and no one wanted it to become public. A billing error that could have ended in a lawsuit. A staffing mistake that could have cost someone their license. A patient complaint that needed to be resolved without damaging the hospital's reputation. Victor always resolved it. He was good at making problems disappear. I admired that about him. I thought it meant he was competent, trustworthy, the kind of man who could be counted on. Now I wonder what else disappeared. We got married in a small church ceremony with 60 people. My parents. His parents, a few friends. I wore my mother's dress, altered to fit. Victor wore a gray suit and cried when I walked down the aisle, which surprised everyone because he was not a man who cried easily. Our honeymoon was 4 days in Gatlinburg. We hiked. We stayed in a cabin with a fireplace. We talked about the future like it was a place we were building together, brick by brick. I wanted children right away. Victor wanted to wait until we were financially stable. We compromised and started trying after 2 years. Caroline was born in 1984. Audrey followed in 1997, 13 years later, after 3 miscarriages I do not talk about. Audrey was not planned, but she was wanted, desperately wanted. When I held her for the first time, I thought, this is the child I have been waiting for. She was small and serious even as a newborn. She did not cry as much as Caroline had. She watched. She studied faces. She seemed to understand things before she had the words for them. Victor adored her. He called her his little philosopher. He would sit with her for hours, reading to her, answering her endless questions, letting her fall asleep on his chest while he watched the evening news. I never worried when he was with her. Never. That thought made my stomach turn. I stood up from the kitchen table and walked to the living room, where we keep the family photo albums in a cabinet under the television. I pulled out the album labeled 1997 to 2005 and sat down on the couch with it in my lap. I turned the pages slowly. Audrey as a baby. Audrey learning to walk. Audrey on her first day of kindergarten, holding a Winnie the Pooh lunchbox. Caroline's high school graduation, with Audrey sitting on Victor's shoulders, grinning. There were so many pictures of Victor and Audrey together. At the zoo, at the park, at her school plays, at the kitchen table working on homework, at her 8th grade science fair, where she built a model of the solar system, and Victor helped her paint the planets. They looked happy. She looked safe. But I know now that photographs do not tell the whole truth. They show the moment someone decided to capture. Not the moments before. Not the moments after. I closed the album and set it on the coffee table. My hands were still shaking. I thought about what Audrey had said. I do not remember. That is the problem. I do not remember anything that would explain this. What did that mean? If she did not remember, did that mean it had not happened? Or did it mean something worse? I have spent my whole life teaching children to trust adults, to believe that the people who love them will protect them. And now, I was sitting in my living room, holding a DNA test that said my husband might be the reason my daughter lost a baby she did not even know belonged to him. I wanted to scream. I wanted to call Audrey and tell her to come back, to tell me this was some kind of horrible mistake, to tell me we could fix it. But I could not fix it, because I did not know what it was. I picked up the notebook Audrey had left and opened it to the first blank page. I found a pen in the drawer of the side table, and I started writing. February last year. Audrey came for Sunday dinner, pot roast, mashed potatoes, green beans. She seemed tired, said work was busy. Marcus was not with her. She said he was visiting his parents. I paused. Had Marcus really been visiting his parents, or had Audrey been alone that weekend? I kept writing. March. Audrey stopped by on a Wednesday afternoon, said she needed to borrow the steam cleaner, stayed for coffee. Victor was home. He had taken a half day. I remember because I was surprised. He rarely took time off. I wrote faster now. April. Audrey called and asked if she could stay the weekend, said her apartment's heat was broken. She slept in her old bedroom. Victor fixed her car Saturday morning. They were in the garage for over an hour. I stopped. Why did I remember that? Because I had been making lunch, and I kept checking the window, wondering why it was taking so long to change the oil. I wrote it down. May. Audrey came for Mother's Day, brought flowers, seemed quiet, pale. I asked if she was feeling okay. She said she was fine. Fine. How many times had she said that word, and I had believed her? I flipped to a new page and kept writing. Every visit, every phone call, every time she had been in this house in the months before the pregnancy, and every time Victor had been alone with her. I wrote until my hand cramped, until the page was full, until I had filled 10 pages with memories I had not thought about in over a year. Then I stopped and read what I had written. It did not prove anything, but it did not disprove anything either. And that was the problem. I looked at the clock. 5:45. Victor would be home in 30 minutes. I closed the notebook and slid it into the kitchen drawer under the dish towels, where he would not think to look. Then I started making dinner, because I did not know what else to do. I want to pause right here, because this is the part I wish more families understood. A small change is not always small. Sometimes it is the only language a hurting person has left. If you know what I mean, tell me in the comments where you are listening from tonight. And if someone you love needs a reminder to pay attention, share this with them. Subscribe if you want to sit with me again tomorrow. I have more stories to tell, and every one of them carries a lesson. Victor came home at 6:17. I heard his car pull into the driveway, heard the engine shut off, heard his footsteps on the porch, the key in the lock, the door opening. Eleanor, he called, the way he always did. In the kitchen, I answered, and my voice sounded normal. He walked in, still wearing his golf shirt and khakis, his face tan from the afternoon sun. He smiled when he saw me standing at the stove. "Smells good," he said, and he kissed me on the cheek. His lips felt like a stranger's. "How was your game?" I asked, stirring the pasta. "Good. Jim finally broke 90. We are never going to hear the end of it." He poured himself a glass of water from the pitcher in the fridge and leaned against the counter, watching me. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "Just tired." "Long day?" "Something like that." He studied me for a moment, and I felt his gaze like a weight. "Audrey stopped by?" he asked. I froze. "Why do you ask?" Her car was here when I drove past earlier. I was coming back from the driving range. I had not known he had driven past. "She stopped by for a few minutes," I said carefully. Just to say hello. Everything okay with her? Fine. There was that word again. Victor nodded and took a sip of his water. Good, he said. I worry about her sometimes. She has been through a lot. I turned to face him. What do you mean? He shrugged. The miscarriage, the breakup, that is a lot for anyone to carry. She did not break up with Marcus, I said. They ended things mutually. Right, Victor said. I just meant it must have been hard. I stirred the pasta and said nothing. We ate dinner at the table in silence. Victor talked about work, about a consulting project he was considering, about a leak in the basement he wanted to check before winter. I made appropriate sounds. I nodded. I pretended to listen. But all I could think about was the DNA report hidden in the folder upstairs and the notebook full of memories hidden in the kitchen drawer. After dinner, Victor went to his study to read. I cleaned the dishes, wiped down the counters, and stood at the sink staring out at the backyard as the light faded. I thought about calling Audrey. I thought about confronting Victor. I thought about pretending none of this had ever happened. Instead, I went upstairs to our bedroom, locked the bathroom door, and sat on the edge of the tub with my head in my hands. And for the first time in 43 years, I let myself ask the question I had spent my entire marriage avoiding. What if I married a man I do not really know? I did not sleep that night. I lay beside Victor in the dark, listening to him breathe. Deep, even breaths. The kind that come easily to a man with a clear conscience, or a man who has learned to bury things so deep that even sleep cannot disturb them. I counted the hours by the digital clock on the nightstand. 11:43, 1:16, 2:52, 4:09. At 5:30, I gave up and went downstairs. The house was still. The kind of still that happens in the hours before dawn, when the world feels like it is holding its breath. I made coffee in the dark, not turning on the overhead light, just the small lamp over the sink. I sat at the kitchen table with my hands wrapped around the mug and stared at the folder I had left on the counter. I had hidden it in the cabinet above the refrigerator before Victor came home. Behind the serving platters we only use at Thanksgiving, but I could still feel it there, like a weight pressing down on the ceiling. I thought about what Audrey had said. I do not remember. What did she mean by that? Did she mean she had no memory of being with Victor in a way that could explain the DNA results? Or did she mean something had happened that she could not access? Something blocked. Something buried. That thought made my throat close. I set the coffee down and pulled the notebook out from under the dish towels. I opened it to the pages I had written the night before and read through them again. February, March, April, May. A pattern was forming, but I did not want to see it. Every month, Audrey had been at the house, and every month there had been moments when she and Victor had been alone together, in the garage, in the basement, in his study. Moments that had seemed ordinary at the time. How many times had I been in another room, doing laundry, or preparing dinner, or grading papers, while they were somewhere else in the house? How many times had I assumed they were just talking, just father and daughter, just safe? I turned to a blank page and started writing again. This time, I was not writing what I remembered. I was writing what I did not remember. The gaps. The spaces where I should have been paying attention, but was not. Why had Audrey needed to borrow the steam cleaner in March? Her apartment was small. She had always cleaned it herself. Why did she suddenly need something from us? Why had she stayed the weekend in April when her heat was broken? She had friends. She had Marcus. Why come home? Why had Victor taken a half day in March? He never took time off in the middle of the week. What had been so important? The questions piled up like stones, and beneath them, a darker question I did not want to ask. Had I ignored the signs because I did not want to see them? Thank you for staying with me this far. I know this is heavy, but I promise I am not telling it to leave you in the dark. I am telling it because somebody out there may need courage, or patience, or the reminder that love must sometimes ask difficult questions. If this is helping you, leave a like. Tell me what time it is where you are, morning, afternoon, or the middle of the night. I read those comments like postcards from people I may never meet, but still care about. By 7 in the morning, I had filled another 5 pages. I heard Victor moving upstairs, the sound of the shower turning on, the creak of the floorboards in our bedroom, the closet door opening and closing. I closed the notebook and slid it back into the drawer. When he came downstairs at 7:30, I was standing at the stove making scrambled eggs, and my face was perfectly calm. "Morning," he said, pouring himself coffee. "Morning." He sat down at the table and unfolded the newspaper, the Lexington Herald Leader. He read it every morning, cover to cover, even though he could get the same news online. He said he liked the feel of paper in his hands. I set a plate of eggs and toast in front of him. "Thank you," he said, not looking up. I sat down across from him with my own plate, but I did not eat. "Victor," I said. "Can I ask you something?" He glanced up. "Of course." I chose my words carefully. "Do you remember last February, when Audrey was coming around more often?" He frowned slightly, thinking. "Last February? That was right before she and Marcus broke up, was it not?" They had not broken up yet. "Right. She was here a few times. Why?" "I was just thinking about it," I said, trying to remember what we did, what we talked about. He shrugged. "I do not remember anything specific. She probably just needed a break from her apartment. You know how she gets when work is stressful." "Do you remember if you and she ever talked? Just the two of you?" His eyes sharpened slightly, just a fraction. But I saw it. "Why are you asking?" "No reason," I said quickly. "I was just going through some old photos yesterday, and it made me think about her." He watched me for a moment, then went back to his eggs. "We talked," he said. "Nothing unusual. She asked me about some work stuff once. I think she was considering a job change. I gave her some advice." "What kind of advice?" "Eleanor." He set his fork down. "What is this about?" "Nothing," I said. "I am just curious." "You do not sound curious. You sound like you are interrogating me." "I am not. Is something going on with Audrey?" "No." "Then why are you asking me about last February, like it is some kind of investigation?" I stood up and carried my untouched plate to the sink. "I am sorry," I said. "I did not mean to upset you." He stood as well, crossing the kitchen to stand beside me. "Eleanor," he said softly, "talk to me. What is going on?" I wanted to tell him. I wanted to turn around and say, "Our daughter brought me a DNA test yesterday that says you are the father of the baby she lost. Explain that to me. Make it make sense. Give me a reason to believe this is all some terrible mistake." But I looked at his face, and I saw the same expression he had worn 1,000 times before. Calm, concerned, reasonable. The face of a man who had spent 40 years making problems disappear. And I realized that if I told him now, before I had answers, before I had proof, before I understood what had really happened, he would find a way to make this disappear too. "I am fine," I said. "Just tired." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "All right," he said. "But if something is bothering you, I want you to tell me." "I will." He kissed the top of my head and went back to his coffee. I stood at the sink, gripping the edge of the counter, and felt the weight of the lie settle into my chest like a stone. I spent the rest of the morning alone. Victor left at 9 to meet a friend for breakfast. I told him I had errands to run. He did not ask what kind. As soon as his car pulled out of the driveway, I went upstairs to his study. I had not been in there in months. It was his space. A small room at the end of the hallway with built-in bookshelves, a wooden desk, and a leather chair that had belonged to his father. He kept his files there, his old work documents, his personal papers. I stood in the doorway for a moment, feeling like an intruder. Then I stepped inside. The room smelled like him. cologne and old books and the faint scent of the cigars he used to smoke before the doctor told him to quit. The desk was neat. Everything in its place. Pens in a ceramic cup. A stack of folders on the left. A laptop in the center. I opened the top drawer. Insurance documents. Tax forms. Bank statements. I opened the second drawer. Old hospital ID badges. A few photographs. A letter from the board thanking him for his years of service. I opened the third drawer. And I found a small leather-bound notebook. It was old. The edges were worn. The leather was cracked. I pulled it out and opened it. Inside were handwritten notes, dates, names, locations, all written in Victor's precise, slanted script. I flipped through the pages slowly. Most of it was work-related. Meeting notes, budget figures, staffing issues. But then I found a page dated February 9th of last year, and written beneath the date, in blue ink, were 3 words. Talk to Audrey. Private. My hands started shaking. I turned the page. March 14th. A called. Needs help. Do not tell E. April 22nd. A. Here. Upset. Handled. May 6th. A. Avoiding calls. Check on her. I sat down in Victor's chair, holding the notebook in my lap, and felt the room spin. He had been tracking her, not in the way a concerned father tracks a struggling daughter, in the way someone tracks a problem they need to manage. I turned more pages. June 3rd. A. Confirmed pregnant. Discussed options. My breath stopped. June. Audrey had not told me she was pregnant until late July, but Victor had known in June, and he had written discussed options. What did that mean? I kept reading. July 18th. A. Keeping it. Marcus believes child is his. Best outcome. I closed my eyes. Victor had known the baby was not Marcus's, and he had let Audrey believe it was safer that way. August 9th. A. Stable. No further action needed. October 27th. A. Hospitalized. Pregnancy loss at 22 weeks. Contained. Contained. I read that word 3 times. Contained. Like a spill. Like a leak. Like something that needed to be managed before it spread. I stood up, still holding the notebook, and walked to the window. Outside, the street looked exactly the same as it always had. Mrs. Callahan walking her dog. The mailman making his rounds. The Henderson sprinkler running even though it was November. Everything looked normal, but nothing was. I want to pause right here because this is the part I wish more families understood. A small change is not always small. Sometimes it is the only language a hurting person has left. If you know what I mean, tell me in the comments where you are listening from tonight. And if someone you love needs a reminder to pay attention, share this with them. Subscribe if you want to sit with me again tomorrow. I have more stories to tell, and every one of them carries a lesson. I took the notebook downstairs and set it on the kitchen table next to the DNA report. Then I called Audrey. She answered on the 3rd ring. Mom? I need you to come over, I said. Is everything okay? No, I said. It is not, but I think I found something. There was a pause. I will be there in 20 minutes, she said. She arrived in 15. I was waiting on the porch when she pulled up. She got out of the car and walked up the steps slowly, her eyes searching my face. What did you find? She asked. I handed her the notebook. She opened it, read the first page, then the second. Then she sat down on the porch swing and kept reading. I watched her face change, from confusion to understanding to something I can only describe as collapse. When she finally looked up, her eyes were wet. He knew, she whispered. Yes. He knew the whole time. Yes. She stood up, holding the notebook against her chest like a shield. What does discussed options mean? She asked. I do not know. What does contained mean? I do not know. Mom, her voice cracked. What did he do to me? I reached for her, but she stepped back. I need to know, she said. I need to know what happened in those gaps, in the times I do not remember. We will find out, I said. How? I do not know yet, but we will. She looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in her face, a decision being made. There is someone I need you to meet, she said. Who? A woman named Dr. Lillian Voss. She specializes in memory recovery, trauma therapy. She has been helping me piece things together. What has she said? That the gaps in my memory are not normal. That they are consistent with something called dissociative amnesia, which happens when the brain protects itself from something too painful to process. I felt my knees weaken. Audrey. She wants to meet you, Audrey said. She thinks you might remember things I do not. She thinks if we work together, we can figure out what really happened. When? Tomorrow, 2 in the afternoon. Her office is on West Main Street. I nodded. Okay. Audrey looked down at the notebook in her hands. Can I keep this? She asked. Yes. She tucked it into her bag, then turned to leave. Audrey, I said. She stopped. I am sorry, I said. I am sorry I did not see it. I am sorry I did not protect you. She looked at me with eyes that were older than they should have been. You are seeing it now, she said. That is what matters. And then she was gone. I did not tell Victor about the notebook. When he came home that evening, I was in the living room folding laundry, and I acted like nothing had changed. He asked if I wanted to watch a movie. I said yes. We sat on the couch together, his arm around my shoulders, and I felt like I was sitting next to a stranger. The next day, I told him I was meeting a friend for lunch. He did not ask which friend. I drove to West Main Street and parked in front of a 3-story brick building with a discreet bronze plaque beside the door. Voss and Associates, Counseling and Trauma Recovery. Audrey was waiting in the lobby. She stood when she saw me, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she reached out and took my hand. Thank you for coming, she said. Of course. A woman appeared in the doorway to the left. She was in her mid-50s, with short silver hair and kind eyes behind black-framed glasses. She wore a gray sweater and jeans, and she looked like the kind of person you could trust with your worst secrets. Mrs. Ramsey, she said, extending her hand. I am Lillian Voss. Thank you for being here. I shook her hand. Her grip was firm. Please, she said. Come in. We followed her into a small office. Soft lighting, comfortable chairs, a bookshelf full of titles I recognized from my years teaching. Trauma and recovery. The body keeps the score. What happened to you? Dr. Voss gestured for us to sit, and she took the chair across from us. I want to start by saying that this is a safe space, she said. Nothing you say here will leave this room unless you want it to. My job is not to tell you what happened. My job is to help you remember and to help you understand what you remember. I nodded. She looked at Audrey. Do you want to start, or should I? You, Audrey said quietly. Dr. Voss turned to me. Mrs. Ramsey, Audrey came to see me 3 months ago. She was struggling with gaps in her memory related to the months before her pregnancy. She described feeling like there were pieces missing, conversations she could not quite recall, moments that felt blurry or distant. At first, she thought it was just stress, but when she received the DNA results, she realized the gaps were not random. What do you mean? I asked. The gaps were specifically around interactions with your husband. The room felt very small. Audrey has been working with me to explore those gaps, Dr. Voss continued, and what we have found is consistent with a pattern of control, manipulation, and possibly coercion. Possibly? I said. Yes, because without full memory recovery, we cannot say definitively what happened. But the evidence we do have suggests that something occurred that Audrey's mind is protecting her from. I looked at Audrey. She was staring at her hands. What kind of evidence? I asked. Dr. Voss opened a folder on her lap and pulled out a piece of paper. Audrey kept a journal during that time, she said. She did not remember keeping it until a few weeks ago when she found it in a box in her closet. Most of the entries are mundane: work, friends, daily life. But there are 3 entries that stand out. She handed me the paper. It was a photocopy of a handwritten page, Audrey's handwriting. I recognized it immediately. The entry was dated February 14th. I went to Mom and Dad's today. I do not know why I feel so strange writing this down, but I need to remember. I need to have proof that I was there, that it happened, that I am not imagining things. Dad wanted to talk to me alone. He said it was important. He said Mom did not need to know. I do not remember what we talked about. I remember going into his study. I remember sitting down. I remember feeling very tired. And then I remember leaving. That is all. Why can I not remember the middle part? I read it twice. Then I looked at the next entry, March 20th. It happened again. I went over to borrow something and ended up in the basement with Dad. He said he wanted to show me something. I do not remember what. I remember the smell of the basement, damp concrete, old paint. I remember his voice, calm, steady. And then I was upstairs again, and Mom was asking if I wanted tea, and I said yes, even though I do not drink tea. Why did I say yes? Why can I not remember? The 3rd entry was dated April 27th. I think something is wrong with me. I keep losing time, hours, sometimes a whole afternoon. I will be at Mom and Dad's house, and then I will be in my car driving home, and I will not remember how I got there. Marcus asked me yesterday if I was okay. He said I seemed distant, distracted. I told him I was fine. But I do not feel fine. I feel like I am disappearing. I set the paper down. My hands were shaking so hard I had to press them flat against my knees. "What does this mean?" I whispered. "It means," Dr. Voss said gently, "that Audrey was experiencing dissociative episodes, moments where her conscious mind was not fully present. This can happen for a number of reasons, but in cases like this, it is often the result of psychological manipulation, sometimes combined with substances that affect memory." "Substances," I said. "Sedatives, sleeping medication, anything that can cause short-term amnesia." I looked at Audrey. "Did he give you something?" I asked. "I do not know," she said. "I do not remember." Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to remember this. Concern is not the same as accusation. Paying attention is not the same as judging. If you have ever been called dramatic when you were simply worried, write the word "listen" in the comments. And if you have not subscribed yet, I would be grateful if you did. There is a new story every day, and maybe tomorrow's story will reach someone right when they need it. Dr. Voss leaned forward. "Mrs. Ramsey," she said, "I need to ask you some difficult questions, and I need you to answer them as honestly as you can." I nodded. "Did your husband ever have access to prescription medications, specifically sedatives or sleep aids?" I thought about it. "Yes," I said slowly. "He worked in hospital administration for 30 years. He had connections. He used to bring home samples sometimes. For me, when I had trouble sleeping. For Audrey, when she was in college and had insomnia during finals." "Do you know what kind of medication?" "Ambien. Sometimes Xanax." Dr. Voss made a note. "Did he ever give Audrey medication when she visited your home?" "I do not know. He might have. If she mentioned being stressed or tired, he would offer her something to help. He was always trying to fix things." "Did you ever notice her acting unusually tired or disoriented after spending time with him?" I closed my eyes and thought back, and then I remembered. March. Audrey sitting on the couch after borrowing the steam cleaner, her eyes glassy, her words slurred slightly. I had thought she was just exhausted from work. April. Audrey asleep in her old bedroom at 4 p.m, even though she had only been at the house for 2 hours. I had thought she was catching up on rest. May. Audrey leaving the house without her purse, then coming back 20 minutes later looking confused. I had thought she was distracted. Yes, I whispered. I noticed, but I did not think anything of it. Dr. Voss nodded. That is not your fault, she said. You were not looking for signs of harm. You were looking at your husband, your family. People we love can hide in plain sight. Audrey spoke for the first time since we had sat down. Dr. Voss thinks he was drugging me, she said. Not enough to knock me out completely, just enough to make me compliant, suggestible, enough that I would not fight, enough that I would not remember. I felt bile rise in my throat. And then, Audrey continued, her voice shaking, he did whatever he wanted, and I could not stop him, because I did not even know it was happening. I stood up. I walked to the window. I pressed my forehead against the glass and tried to breathe. Mrs. Ramsey, Dr. Voss said quietly, I know this is overwhelming, but I need you to stay with us, because what happens next depends on you. I turned around. What do you mean? Audrey cannot pursue this alone. She needs your support. She needs your testimony, and she needs you to be willing to stand with her, even if it means standing against your husband. I am standing with her, I said. I know you want to, Dr. Voss said, but wanting to and actually doing it are two different things. When this becomes real, when there are legal proceedings, when your community finds out, when your family fractures, you will be tempted to protect him, to protect your marriage, to protect the life you built. I have seen it happen 100 times. I looked at Audrey. She was crying silently, tears running down her face, her hands clenched in her lap. I am not protecting him, I said. I am done protecting him. Dr. Voss held my gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded. Good, she said, because we have work to do. She reached into her folder and pulled out another document. This is a referral to a forensic psychologist who specializes in memory recovery through therapeutic techniques. If Audrey consents, we can begin a process called guided recall, which may help her access some of the lost memories. It is not easy. It can be painful, but it may give us the clarity we need. Audrey looked at me. Will you be there? She asked. Yes, I said. Every step. Dr. Voss handed Audrey the referral. There is something else, she said. The notebook you found, the one with your husband's notes. That is evidence. You need to keep it safe. Do not tell him you have it. Do not confront him with it. Not yet. When? I asked. When we have everything we need to make sure he cannot talk his way out of it. I sat back down. What else do we need? Dr. Voss pulled out a legal pad and a pen. We need a timeline, she said. Every interaction Audrey had with your husband in the 6 months before the pregnancy. Every visit, every phone call, every moment she was in your home. We need to cross-reference it with the journal entries and the notebook. We need to identify patterns. She looked at me. And we need you to remember everything, even the things that seemed small, even the things you told yourself did not matter. I thought about the notebook I had been keeping, the one hidden in the kitchen drawer. I have been writing things down, I said. Good. Bring it next time. When is next time? 3 days. Same time. Audrey and I left the office together. We stood in the parking lot, the November wind cold against our faces. Mom, she said, I need to ask you something. Anything. If we do this, if we take this all the way, it is going to destroy him. It is going to destroy your marriage. It is going to destroy the family. Are you ready for that? I looked at her. My daughter. My baby. The girl I had carried and loved and failed to protect. Yes, I said, I am ready. She nodded, and then she hugged me, and I held her like I should have been holding her all along. I did not sleep that night. I did not even try. Victor went to bed at 10:30, as he always did, after watching the evening news with his feet crossed at the ankles and one hand resting on the arm of his chair. He looked so ordinary sitting there, so familiar. The same man who had fixed the loose banister on the stairs, who had planted tulips along the walkway because I loved yellow flowers, who had carried Caroline on his shoulders at county fairs and taught Audrey how to ride a bicycle in the church parking lot. And yet, when he turned to me and said, "Coming up?" I felt something cold move through my chest. "No," I said. "I think I'll read for a while." He looked at me for a second longer than usual. "You've been reading a lot lately." "I suppose I have." "Anything good?" I almost laughed. Not because anything was funny, but because grief sometimes presses against the body in strange ways. It looks for any door it can find. "No," I said. "Not really." Victor nodded, kissed the top of my head, and went upstairs. I waited until I heard the bedroom door close. Then I sat very still in the living room, listening. The house had always made noises at night, pipes settling, floorboards shifting, the furnace clicking awake. I used to find those sounds comforting. They were the language of home. That night, every creak sounded like a warning. At midnight, I rose from my chair and walked into the kitchen. I opened the drawer beneath the dish towels and removed the notebook I had been keeping for Audrey. I placed it on the table. Then I took out the DNA report, the photocopies from Dr. Voss's office, and the notes I had written after our session. One by one, I spread them across the blue checkered tablecloth. A mother should never have to build a case against the man who helped raise her child. But there I was. And if you are still with me right now, I want to thank you from the deepest part of my heart. Stories like this are not easy to hear. They are not easy to tell. But sometimes the hardest stories are the ones that help someone recognize the truth in their own life. If this is touching something in you, leave a like, subscribe, and write in the comments where you are listening from tonight. Sometimes courage begins when one person realizes they are not alone. I began with February. February 9th, Victor's notebook. Talk to Audrey. Private. February 14th, Audrey's journal. I remember going into his study. I remember sitting down. I remember feeling very tired. And then I remember leaving. I wrote both entries on a clean page, side by side. Then March 14th. Victor's notebook. A called. Needs help. Do not tell E. March 20th. Audrey's journal. It happened again. I went over to borrow something and ended up in the basement with Dad. I stopped writing when I saw that word again. Dad. That was what broke me. Not Victor. Not my husband. Not the man in the DNA report. Dad. Because that was who Audrey thought he was. That was the role he had been given. That was the sacred name he had worn. A father is supposed to be the person standing between his child and the danger outside the door. A father is supposed to be the lock, not the intruder. I pressed my hand over my mouth and sobbed so quietly that even I barely heard it. Then I kept writing. April, May, June. By 2 a.m, I had a timeline, not a complete one, not enough to answer every question, but enough to see the shape of what had happened. Victor had not made a mistake. Mistakes are sudden, clumsy, human. This was not a mistake. This was a pattern. And patterns do not happen by accident. The next morning, I called Audrey before Victor woke. She answered on the first ring. Mom? I made the timeline, I whispered. There was silence. How bad is it? I looked down at the papers in front of me. Bad enough. Her breath trembled. Did you sleep? No. Me neither. For a moment, neither of us spoke. And in that silence, I understood something painful. Audrey and I had always loved each other, but we had never truly stood on the same side of a disaster before. When she lost the baby, I had comforted her, yes. I had brought casseroles and washed her laundry and sat beside her in the hospital. But I had not understood the center of her grief. Now I was walking toward it with her. Not because I wanted to, because she should never have had to walk there alone. Mom, she said quietly, I'm scared. I know. What if I remember? I closed my eyes. Then I will be there. What if I don't? Then I will still be there. What if no one believes me? I looked toward the stairs, toward the bedroom where Victor was sleeping peacefully. Then I will make them believe me. She cried then, not loudly, just one broken sound, followed by another, followed by another. And I sat in my kitchen with the phone pressed to my ear, letting my daughter cry, because sometimes love is not advice. Sometimes love is simply staying on the line. 3 days later, Audrey and I returned to Dr. Voss's office. This time, Audrey looked different. Not stronger exactly, but more decided. She wore a navy coat buttoned all the way to her throat, and her hair was pulled back tightly from her face. She had always looked younger than her age, but that afternoon, she looked like someone who had crossed a border and knew there was no road back. Dr. Voss greeted us with the same calm warmth. "Come in," she said. We sat in the same chairs as before. I placed my notebook on the small table between us. Dr. Voss opened it and read quietly for several minutes. Neither Audrey nor I spoke. Finally, Dr. Voss looked up. "This is very helpful," she said. "Helpful," I repeated, because the word felt too clean for something so ugly. "Yes," she said gently. "It establishes consistency. It connects Victor's notes, Audrey's journal, and your observations. That matters." Audrey stared at the floor. "What happens now?" Dr. Voss folded her hands. "Now we proceed carefully. There are two paths, the therapeutic path and the legal path. They can overlap, but they are not the same." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means Audrey's healing must not depend entirely on whether the law can prove what happened. A legal process may take months, it may be painful, it may be imperfect, but her recovery has to begin now." Audrey nodded slowly. "And the legal path? For that, you will need an attorney, someone experienced in sexual assault cases, family abuse, and evidentiary preservation. You will also need to consider making a police report." The words hung in the room. Police report. I had taught children to call the police when they were in danger. I had told them officers were helpers. I had invited uniformed visitors to my classroom during Safety Week, but the idea of calling them on my husband made my body go cold. Not because I doubted Audrey, because some part of me still understood that once the truth left our hands, it would belong to everyone. The police, the courts, the neighbors, Caroline, the church, the hospital board, the friends who had eaten at our table, the people who had called Victor respectable. A family can hide a secret for decades, but once truth enters the room, it opens every curtain. Audrey looked at me. I knew what she was asking without words. "Will you still stand beside me when this becomes public?" I reached for her hand. "Yes," I said. Dr. Voss nodded. "Then I have a name for you." She wrote it on a card. Margaret Hale, attorney at law. Beneath the name was a phone number. "Call her today," Dr. Voss said. "Do not wait." I took the card. "I'll call." "No," Audrey said. I turned toward her. "I'll call," she said. "It happened to me." Her voice was quiet, but there was steel in it. I nodded. "You're right." That afternoon, we sat in Audrey's car outside Dr. Voss's building while she called Margaret Hale. I could hear only Audrey's side of the conversation. "My name is Audrey Ramsey. Dr. Lillian Voss referred me. I need to speak with someone about a possible sexual assault case involving a family member." Possible. That word hurt. Not because Audrey was unsure, but because language sometimes has to move carefully where the heart already knows. She listened. "Yes, I have documentation, a DNA test, journals, a notebook written by him. My mother is willing to give a statement." Another pause. "Tomorrow morning works." She ended the call and sat staring through the windshield. 10 o'clock, she said. "I'll pick you up." "No," she said. "I'll drive." "All right. But I want you there." "I will be." She nodded, then whispered, "I don't know who I am after this." I looked at her. "Oh, sweetheart." "I mean it," she said. "I was his daughter. I was your daughter. I was Marcus's girlfriend. I was going to be someone's mother, and now I feel like every name I had has been taken apart." I wanted to tell her she was still Audrey, still brilliant, still kind, still the girl who used to collect smooth stones from the creek and line them on her windowsill, still the child who cried when we cut down the old maple because she thought trees had memories. But I knew better than to rush her toward comfort, so I said, "Then we will find the names that still belong to you." She looked at me. "And what if there aren't any?" "Then we will build new ones." The attorney's office was downtown, on the third floor of a building with polished floors and brass elevator doors. Margaret Hale was older than I expected, perhaps in her early 60s, with sharp blue eyes and silver hair cut neatly at her chin. She did not waste words. She listened. That was the first thing I noticed. She listened without interrupting, without softening her face into pity, without making the story smaller so it would be easier to hold. Audrey spoke first. Then I did. We showed her the DNA report, Victor's notebook, Audrey's journal entries, my timeline. Margaret read everything. When she finished, she removed her glasses and set them on the desk. "I am going to be direct," she said. "This is serious evidence." Audrey swallowed. "Is it enough?" "Enough for what?" "To prove it." Margaret leaned back. "Proof is a legal word. Evidence is what we have now. The DNA test is significant. The notebook is significant. Your journal entries are significant. Your mother's observations are significant. Together, they create a credible basis for a report and investigation." "And if he denies it?" Audrey asked. "He will." The certainty in her voice made my stomach tighten. Margaret continued. "Men like this rarely confess when first confronted, especially men with reputations, especially men who have spent their lives managing institutions, records, narratives, and people." I looked down at my hands. Narratives. That was what Victor had done for years. He had not merely fixed problems. He had controlled stories. Margaret turned to me. "Mrs. Ramsey, does your husband know you have the notebook?" "No." "Does he know about the DNA test?" "No." "Does he know Audrey is speaking with an attorney?" "No." "Good. Keep it that way for now." Audrey stiffened. "For how long?" "Until we make copies of everything, secure the originals, and decide how to proceed. I recommend placing the original notebook and DNA report somewhere outside the home immediately. A safe deposit box, my office, or with law enforcement." "My office," Audrey said quickly. Margaret nodded. "We can arrange that." "And Victor?" I asked. "What about him?" I struggled with the words. "Do I go home to him?" Margaret studied me. "That depends. Do you feel physically unsafe?" I almost said no. Then I stopped. Because I had slept beside Victor for 43 years and only now understood I did not know what he was capable of. "I don't know," I said. "That is an honest answer," Margaret replied. She opened a drawer, removed a card, and handed it to me. "This is a domestic violence resource center. You may not think that term applies to you. Many women don't at first. But coercion, manipulation, drugging, sexual abuse, and intimidation all exist within family systems. You need a safety plan." A safety plan. At 76 years old, after 43 years of marriage, I needed a safety plan from my husband. Something inside me cracked open then. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough for the truth to enter. Margaret spent the next hour explaining steps, copies, documentation, no confrontation, no warning Victor, secure evidence, change passwords, check bank accounts, keep important documents accessible, have a place to stay, do not underestimate a person whose public identity depends on secrecy. By the time we left, my hands were cold. Audrey walked beside me to the elevator. "Are you okay?" she asked. "No," I said. She nodded. "Me neither." And for some reason, that made both of us laugh. A small laugh, a broken laugh, the kind people laugh at funerals when grief becomes too heavy and the body reaches for air. When I returned home, Victor was in the kitchen. He was standing by the counter, holding my notebook. Not his notebook, mine, the one I had hidden under the dish towels. For a second, neither of us moved. Then he looked up, and I saw it. Not guilt, not fear. Calculation. "Eleanor," he said calmly, "we need to talk." The room tilted. I set my purse down slowly. "Where did you find that?" "In the drawer." "You went through my drawer?" His mouth tightened slightly. "Our drawer." "No," I said. "My drawer." He looked at the notebook in his hand. "You have been writing things down." "Yes." "About me?" "Yes." "About Audrey." I did not answer. He closed the notebook and placed it on the table with great care. "You should have come to me." That almost made me laugh. "I should have?" "Yes," he said, "before letting Audrey fill your head with accusations." There it was. Not concern, not confusion, not horror. Accusations. "You know?" I asked. His face changed so slightly that another woman might have missed it. I did not. "Know what?" "Don't do that," I said. "Do what?" "Perform innocence." His eyes hardened. For 43 years I had seen Victor irritated, tired, disappointed, impatient, but I had rarely seen him angry. Not truly angry. Now I saw it. And it was quiet. That frightened me more than shouting would have. "You have no idea what she has been saying," he said. "I know about the DNA test." Silence. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere upstairs, a floorboard settled. Victor did not move. Then he exhaled slowly. "Audrey is unwell." I stared at him. "She has been unstable since the miscarriage," he continued. "You know that. Grief can distort memory. It can create obsessions. She needs help, Eleanor, not encouragement." "She is getting help." "From whom?" "That is not your concern." "I am her father." "No," I said. The word came out before I had time to soften it. Victor's face went still. I had struck something, not his conscience, his authority. "I raised her," he said. "You hurt her." "You do not know that. I know enough." He stepped closer. I stepped back. It was small, instinctive, but he noticed. His expression shifted again. "Are you afraid of me?" I did not answer. "Eleanor." "Yes," I said. The word seemed to surprise both of us. Victor looked at me for a long moment. Then he smiled, not warmly, sadly, as if I had disappointed him. "That is what she has done to you," he said. "She has turned you against me." "No," I said. "The truth did that." His eyes flashed. "You want truth? Fine." Audrey came to me. She was confused, emotional. She was unhappy with Marcus. She needed someone to talk to. I felt my stomach twist. "Careful," I said. He ignored me. She was not a child. The room went silent. Every bit of air left my lungs. I looked at the man I had married, the man who had held my babies, the man who had carved Thanksgiving turkeys, balanced checkbooks, and stood beside me at gravesides. And I saw him clearly. Not as a monster from a storybook. Worse, as a man who believed his own excuses. "She was your daughter," I whispered. He flinched. Only slightly. But he flinched. "She was vulnerable," he said. "She misread things. Stop. She needed comfort. Stop. You don't understand what it was like. Stop talking." My voice was low, but he obeyed. I picked up my purse. "Where are you going?" he asked. "Audrey's." "You are not leaving this house." I turned back to him. For the first time in 43 years, I saw the door behind him, not as part of my home, but as an exit. Yes, I said. I am. He stepped toward me again. I lifted my phone. If you try to stop me, I will call 911. He froze. I could see him thinking, weighing, calculating what would happen if a police car appeared on Hartwell Crescent, what Mrs. Callahan would see, what the neighbors would whisper, what record would exist. Then he stepped aside. I walked past him. At the door he said, "Eleanor." I stopped but did not turn. "You will regret this." I looked back then. "No," I said. "I regret waiting this long." And I left. Audrey opened her apartment door before I knocked twice. The moment she saw my face, she knew. "He knows," she said. "Yes." She pulled me inside and locked the door. What happened? I told her everything. Not all at once, not cleanly. I had to stop several times. I had to sit down. Audrey brought me water and wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, as if I were the daughter now and she were the mother. When I repeated Victor's words, she was not a child, Audrey made a sound I will never forget. It was not a cry, it was recognition. She covered her mouth and folded forward as if her body had been struck by something it had been waiting for. "Oh my God," she whispered. "He said that before." I went still. "What?" She looked at me, eyes wide and terrified. "He said that before." "When?" "I don't know." She pressed both hands to her temples. "I can hear it. I can hear his voice. He said, 'You're not a child anymore.'" I moved toward her carefully. "Audrey?" "He said it in the study." Her breathing quickened. "February. I was in the study. He closed the door. He gave me tea. I don't drink tea. Why did I drink tea?" I knelt in front of her. "Look at me." "I remember the cup." "Look at me, sweetheart." It had the blue flowers. Mom, the cup had blue flowers. I knew that cup. It was part of a set Victor's mother had given us when we married. I kept them in the upper cabinet and only used them for company. Audrey gripped my hands. "He told me I was tense. He said he had something that would help me sleep. I said no. I think I said no." "You did say no," I told her, even though I did not know. "I believe you." She began shaking. "He said I trusted him." I closed my eyes. "He said I trusted him, and then I got tired." Her voice broke. "I got so tired, Mom." I held her while the memory came apart inside her. Not all of it, not the worst of it, but enough. Enough to turn suspicion into knowledge. Enough to make Audrey stop asking whether she was imagining things. Enough to make me understand that truth does not always arrive as a lightning strike. Sometimes it comes back in pieces. A cup, a phrase, a locked door, the taste of tea. The next morning, Margaret Hale filed the police report with Audrey beside her and me on the other side. Audrey spoke slowly, clearly. When she did not remember, she said she did not remember. When she did, she said what she knew. I gave my statement too. I told them about Victor's notebook, about Audrey's behavior, about the medications, about the conversation in the kitchen, about his words. She was not a child. The detective taking notes looked up at that. He was a middle-aged man with tired eyes and a wedding ring he kept turning with his thumb. "He said that?" "Yes," I said. "Exact words?" "Yes." He wrote it down. Then he asked me a question that stayed with me. "Mrs. Ramsey, did your husband have access to your daughter alone when she was a minor?" The room became very quiet. Audrey looked at me. I thought of the photo albums, the zoo, the science fair, the school plays, the nights Victor had read to her, the times I had been grateful for his devotion. "Yes," I said, barely above a whisper. The detective's face did not change. "Do you have reason to believe anything happened before last year?" I wanted to say no. Every mother wants to say no. But the truth had already punished us for every time I had chosen comfort over doubt. "I don't know," I said, "but I am afraid it might have." Audrey turned away and began to cry silently. And I hated myself then. Not because I had harmed her, but because I had not known how to protect her from someone who lived under the same roof. The investigation began quietly. At first, Victor was contacted, interviewed. He denied everything. Of course he did. He said Audrey was unstable. He said I was confused. He said the DNA result must have been mishandled. He said his notebook was being misinterpreted. He said discussed options referred to helping Audrey with pregnancy decisions as a concerned father. He said contained meant emotionally contained, that he had been relieved when the family seemed stable after the miscarriage. He explained everything. Men like Victor always do. But explanations are not the same as innocence. The police searched our house 2 weeks later. I was not there when they did it. Margaret told me not to be. I stayed at Audrey's apartment, sitting on the edge of her couch while she paced from the kitchen to the window and back again. At 4 p.m, Margaret called. They found medication, she said. Audrey stopped pacing. What kind? I asked. Several bottles, some prescribed to Victor, some not. Ambien, alprazolam, diazepam, a few expired hospital sample packs. I closed my eyes. There's more, Margaret said. Audrey gripped the counter. What? They found the teacup. My heart stopped. The blue flower cup? Audrey asked. Yes, it was wrapped in a towel in a box in the basement. Audrey sat down on the floor, not because she fainted, because her legs simply gave up. I sat beside her, and together we stayed there, on the kitchen floor, while the truth grew larger than the room. If you have stayed with this story this long, I want you to understand something. Believing someone is not a small act. It can be the bridge between a person drowning silently and a person finally reaching shore. If there is someone in your life who has been trying to tell you something with their silence, their distance, their fear, or their sudden change, please listen. Leave a like if this story has moved you, subscribe for more stories like this, and write "Listen" in the comments if you believe no one should have to fight for the truth alone. Caroline found out on a Sunday. I had dreaded that call more than almost anything. Caroline lived in Atlanta with her husband and 2 boys. She had always adored Victor. To her, he was the dependable father, the calm father, the man who mailed birthday cards early and built bookshelves when she bought her first house. When I called, she answered cheerfully, "Hi, Mom. Everything okay?" "No," I said. There was a pause. What happened? I told her enough. Not everything. Not at first. Just enough to explain that there was an investigation, that Audrey had made a report, that Victor was accused of harming her. Caroline did not speak for a long time. Then she said, "That's impossible." I had expected it. Still, it hurt. I know it feels that way. No, Mom. Impossible. Dad would never. Caroline. Audrey has been struggling. You know that. Do not do that. She lost a baby. She broke up with Marcus. She's been isolated. Maybe she's confused. She is not confused. You don't know that. I do. How? I closed my eyes. Because there is DNA evidence. Silence. A silence so sharp it seemed to cut the line in half. What kind of DNA evidence? The baby Audrey lost was Victor's. Caroline made a small sound. Then nothing. Caroline? I'm going to be sick, she whispered. I'm sorry. Don't say that. I am sorry. No, she said, her voice rising. Don't be sorry. Explain it. Tell me there's another explanation. There isn't. There has to be. I thought that too. She began crying then, but her crying was angry. Why are you choosing her? The words hit me harder than I expected. I am not choosing one daughter over another. Yes, you are. No, I said. I am choosing truth over denial. I am choosing the child who was harmed over the man who harmed her. He's our father. He was supposed to be. Caroline hung up. For 3 weeks, she did not call. Those were some of the loneliest weeks of my life. Not because I doubted my choice, but because truth does not spare you grief just because you are on the right side of it. People began to hear things. They always do. At church, Mrs. Whitaker touched my arm and asked if Victor was ill because she had not seen him lately. I told her no. Her eyes lingered on my face too long. At the grocery store, 2 women stopped talking when I entered the aisle. Mrs. Callahan crossed the street one morning pretending not to see me. The world had not ended, but my place in it had changed. I had become a woman people discussed in lowered voices, and Audrey had become something worse in their eyes. A question. That enraged me. Because victims are so often turned into questions. Why now? Why didn't she remember? Why didn't she tell someone? Why was she there? Why did she drink the tea? Why did she keep visiting? As if pain must behave logically to be believed. As if trauma should keep perfect records. As if survival is supposed to look neat. One afternoon, Audrey came to my apartment. I had moved temporarily into a small furnished place near downtown and found me sitting at the table surrounded by old photo albums. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Looking." "For what?" I turned a page. "For what I missed." She sat across from me. "Mom, I need to know." "No," she said gently. "You want to punish yourself." I looked up. Her face was tired but softer than it had been in weeks. "I should have seen something," I said. "Maybe." The honesty startled me. Audrey reached across the table and touched my hand. "But he worked very hard to make sure you didn't." I began to cry. She did not rush to comfort me. I was grateful for that. After a while, she said, "I remembered something else." I wiped my face. "What?" "I was 16. The room seemed to shrink. "We were arguing about college applications. I wanted to apply out of state. He wanted me to stay close. You were at school late for parent conferences." I remembered that year. Audrey had wanted to go to Vermont. Victor said it was too expensive, too far, unnecessary. "He came into my room," she said. "He sat on my bed. He told me family mattered more than ambition." I felt cold. "Did he hurt you?" Audrey looked down. "I don't know." I hated that answer. Not because I doubted it, because I understood what it meant. Another gap. Another locked door inside her mind. "He touched my hair," she said. "I remember that. I remember feeling frozen. And then I remember waking up the next morning with my application folder missing." I covered my mouth. "He told me I must have misplaced it." "You never applied to Vermont," I whispered. "No." I remembered being disappointed. I remembered Audrey saying she had changed her mind. I remembered Victor telling me not to pressure her. I had believed him. Again. Audrey looked at the photographs. "I don't know how far back it goes." "Sweetheart, I don't know if I want to know." That was the first time I understood that memory recovery was not a treasure hunt. It was not about finding every missing piece and placing it in order. Sometimes the mind hides things because knowing all of them at once would destroy a person. And healing is not always remembering everything. Sometimes healing is learning that even without every detail, what happened was still real. Months passed. Victor was charged in January. The news reached the local paper in a short article with careful language. Former hospital administrator accused in family abuse investigation. The piece did not name Audrey, but people knew. Lexington is not as small as it feels, but it is small enough. My phone rang for days. Some people called to offer support. Some called because they wanted information. Some did not call at all, which told me everything I needed to know. Caroline finally came home in February. She arrived alone. I opened the apartment door and found her standing there with red eyes and a suitcase. For a moment, I saw her at 17, leaving for college with too many bags and not enough confidence. Then she said, "I read the report." I stepped aside. She came in, set her suitcase down, and stood in the middle of the room. "I didn't want to believe it," she said. "I know. I hated Audrey for a while." I closed my eyes. "She knows." Caroline cried then. I hated her because if it was true, then nothing was what I thought it was. And I needed it to be false. That is human, I said. It is cruel. Sometimes those are the same thing. She sat on the couch and covered her face. Did he ever hurt me? I sat beside her. I don't know. She nodded, as if she had expected that answer. I keep trying to remember. I keep going through everything. Every sleepover he picked me up from. Every time he drove me somewhere. Every time I was alone with him. I know. How do you live with not knowing? I looked toward the window. You live 1 hour at a time until the hours become days. Caroline leaned against me then. For the first time in years, my older daughter let me hold her. And I did. I held her for all the years I had thought she was fine, simply because she sounded happy on Sunday phone calls. I held her for Audrey. I held her for myself. I held her because family, real family, is not built by pretending nothing happened. It is built by turning toward the wound and saying, we will not let this be buried with us. The trial began the following October. By then, Audrey had changed. She was still wounded, still afraid some days, still startled by certain smells, certain phrases, certain cups in thrift store windows. But she was no longer disappearing. She had returned to work part-time. She had cut her hair to her shoulders. She had started painting, though she said she was terrible at it. She adopted a gray cat named Mabel, who disliked everyone except her. She laughed sometimes. The first time I heard it, I went into the bathroom and cried. Not because everything was healed, because something had survived. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Victor looked older. That was the first thing I noticed. His hair had gone almost entirely white. He wore a dark suit and sat beside his attorney with his hands folded. When I entered, he turned. Our eyes met. For 1 second, I saw my husband. Then he looked away, and I saw only the man who had made a life out of hiding damage behind calm hands. Audrey testified on the 3rd day. She wore a green dress and a small silver necklace Caroline had given her that morning. When she took the stand, I wanted to run to her. I wanted to place myself between her and every eye in that room. But this was her voice, so I stayed seated. She spoke about the DNA test, the journals, the gaps, the memories that had returned, the tea, the study, the phrase, "You're not a child anymore." Victor did not look at her. Not once. That told me more than any confession could have. When the defense attorney questioned her, he tried to do what men like that always try to do. He tried to make her uncertainty sound like dishonesty. He asked why she had continued visiting the house, why she had not remembered sooner, why she had not told Marcus, why she had waited. Audrey listened. Then she said, very calmly, "Because I was drugged, manipulated, and ashamed of something I did not choose. And because the person who hurt me was someone I had been taught to trust." The courtroom went silent. The attorney moved on. I testified after her. I told the truth. Not beautifully, not perfectly, but fully. I told them I had loved Victor, trusted him, defended him, built my life around the belief that he was a good man. Then I told them what I found. The notebook. The pattern, the medications, the kitchen conversation, the sentence I would hear until the day I died. She was not a child. Victor looked at me then. His face was unreadable. Maybe he hated me. Maybe he pitied himself. Maybe he still believed he was the wronged one. It did not matter. For the first time in my life, his interpretation of events did not control mine. After 6 days of testimony, the jury deliberated for 9 hours. 9 hours is not long in the measure of a lifetime, but when you are waiting for strangers to decide whether your daughter's pain counts as truth, 9 hours is a century. Audrey sat between Caroline and me in the hallway. None of us talked much. At one point, Caroline reached for Audrey's hand. Audrey looked surprised. Then she took it. That was the moment I knew that, whatever the verdict, Something in our family had begun to repair, not restore. Restore means to return something to what it was. We would never be what we were. Repair is different. Repair admits the break. At 7:40 that evening, we were called back into the courtroom. The jury filed in. Victor stood. Audrey gripped my hand so tightly it hurt. The foreperson read the verdict. Guilty. The word did not feel like victory. People think justice must feel like triumph. It does not in stories like this. Justice feels like a door opening after years in a locked room. You are grateful. You are relieved, but you are still carrying what happened inside. Audrey bowed her head. Caroline began to cry. I closed my eyes. Victor made no sound. The sentencing came later. Prison. Years. Enough years that he would likely die there. When the judge spoke, I watched Audrey instead of Victor. She did not smile. She did not celebrate. She simply breathed, in and out. As if her body was learning, finally, that the danger had been named. That night, the three of us went back to Audrey's apartment. We ordered soup from the Chinese restaurant around the corner because none of us had eaten all day. Mabel the cat sat on Caroline's suitcase and refused to move. For a while, we ate in silence. Then Caroline raised her paper cup of tea. To Audrey, she said. Audrey looked embarrassed. Don't. No, Caroline said. I need to say it. To Audrey. For telling the truth when the rest of us were too afraid of what it would cost. I lifted my cup. To Audrey. Audrey's eyes filled with tears. Then she raised her own cup. To Mom, she said. I shook my head. No. Yes, she said, for choosing me. I could barely speak. I should have chosen you sooner. You chose me when it mattered. I wanted to argue, but healing sometimes requires accepting grace you do not believe you deserve. So I lifted my cup, and we drank. Months later, I sold the house on Hartwell Crescent. I thought it would break me. It did not. The day I walked through it for the last time, the rooms were empty. No furniture, no photographs, no golf clubs by the door, no smell of coffee in the kitchen, just dust, light, and echoes. I stood in Audrey's old bedroom for a long time. The walls still had faint marks where her bookshelves had been. I remembered her at 7, arranging stuffed animals by size. At 12, reading under the covers with a flashlight. At 16, arguing about Vermont. At 29, sitting at my kitchen table with a manila folder and a face full of terrible courage. I'm sorry, I whispered into the empty room. No answer came, but I said it anyway. Then I walked downstairs. In the kitchen, the afternoon light fell across the place where the table used to be. That table had held birthday cakes, spelling homework, Christmas cookies, unpaid bills, folded laundry, Audrey's DNA report, and my first honest fear. I touched the counter one last time. Then I left the key on the windowsill and closed the door behind me. I live in a smaller place now. A little apartment with morning sun and no basement. I have a balcony where I grow basil and geraniums in clay pots. Caroline visits more often. Audrey comes every Sunday evening, and sometimes we cook together, though neither of us uses the blue flower cups anymore. Audrey is not healed in the way people in movies heal. She does not wake up one day untouched by what happened. No one does. But she is alive in herself again. She paints badly and proudly. She goes to therapy. She works. She adopted another cat because Mabel, apparently, needed an emotional support animal of her own. She laughs. She cries. She remembers some things and not others. She has learned to stop apologizing for both. Caroline has begun therapy too. So have I. At 77 years old, I sat in a therapist's office and learned that guilt is not the same as responsibility. That love without truth becomes a cage. That silence can look like peace from the outside while it rots the foundation underneath. I learned that mothers are not perfect shields. But we can become witnesses. We can become voices. we can become the first person who says, "I believe you." And sometimes, that is the sentence that saves a life. So if you are listening to this story tonight, from a kitchen table, a quiet bedroom, a parked car, a hospital waiting room, or a house where something feels wrong, but no one is saying it out loud, I want you to hear me clearly. Pay attention. Pay attention to the child who gets quiet around one person. Pay attention to the daughter who says she is fine but stops sleeping. Pay attention to the friend who changes after visiting home. Pay attention to the stories that do not line up. Pay attention to the gaps. And when someone you love brings you a truth that threatens the life you built, do not ask first how much it will cost you. Ask what it has already cost them to say it. Thank you for staying with me until the end of Eleanor and Audrey's story. Thank you for giving your time to a story about truth, family, betrayal, courage, and the long road back from silence. If this touched your heart, please leave a like. Subscribe for more emotional stories like this. Share it with someone who needs to remember that love is not proven by protecting secrets. Love is proven by protecting people. And before you go, write in the comments where you are watching from, what time it is there, and one word this story left in your heart. Maybe your word is courage, maybe it is justice, maybe it is mother, maybe it is listen. Mine is this, truth. Because truth is not always gentle. Sometimes truth enters like a storm. It tears the roof from the house, it ruins the photographs, it exposes the cracks in every wall. But after the storm, if we are brave enough to stand in the wreckage, we may discover something sacred. A house built on silence can fall, but a life rebuilt on truth can finally become safe.